Vinyl community, it's time for a different video. I'm gonna start doing reviews once in a while of random albums that don't get a lot of reviews done. We've seen every video and every review for every Beatles album or major classic rock album, every famous album. A lot of current stuff gets album reviews, but I feel like a lot of stuff has been overlooked. And so the first one I'm going to start with is the Beach Boys' 1978 interesting piece of work called MIU Album. Now, for those of you unfamiliar with this album, it's okay to be unfamiliar with this album. Everyone's unfamiliar with this album unless you're a hardcore Beach Boys fan. Even at that point, it's kind of painful. So, I'll give you some backstory. By this point in the Beach Boys' career, in 1978, they had come back in the mid-70s after Endless Summer came out, which was a great greatest hits album, full of all the early 60s fun surfing songs. Brian came back. They kind of forced him back, kind of like a dancing bear, and said, Brian, you're going to get back in the band, write songs, go out on tour. Mike wrote this song called Brian's Back, and it was this whole big campaign that Brian was back in the band, and they were going to go out touring, the country, and play music, and here's Brian, wave to the crowd, Brian. It was kind of sad. Anyways, what happened was they ended up making an album called 15 Big Ones, where Brian was in charge of the album, full producer, full songwriter, for the first time basically since Friends, which came out in 1968. And that album started, 15 Big Ones started originally with the idea that Brian wanted to do just a bunch of covers, a bunch of 50s cover songs. And a lot of the guys in the band were like, nah, we should probably do some originals. So it's half original, half cover. Anyway, they did a couple albums like this with Brian at the helm again. 1977 saw the release of Love You, which is one of the best Beach Boys albums there is. Some people don't like it. I feel like if you're a hardcore fan, you at least appreciate it. A lot of people compare it to Pet Sounds, and they call it like a mid-70s Pet Sounds. I can kind of see that. It's got a lot of heart, a lot of soul, a lot of depth, and you really get an idea of where Brian was at mentally and what he was going through in his life. A lot of the songs are about what he watched on TV, like there's a song about Johnny Carson. One time he felt like running about the sky, so he wrote Solar System. It's full of really intricate songs, and there's a song called The Night Was So Young on that album, and that is just one of the most beautiful songs he's ever written. Unfortunately, at this point, his voice was shot. He was straining for those high notes, and trying to sing in general, his voice was just rough after 3 years of sitting in bed and doing drugs. His voice was just not the same. It sounds like he was still there kind of mentally, like he was still Brian, but his voice was just shot. Fast forward again to the year after. This thing gets put out. Alright, here's the deal. Beach Boys weren't selling too well after Pet Sounds, really, and up until in the summer. This album peaked at 151 on the charts, which is basically like 6 people bought it. And it started off as a Christmas album. Mike Love and Al Jardine were kind of in charge of producing this one because they realized Brian wasn't in any shape to do it. He was kind of falling back a little bit with his mental illness and drug abuse. Carl and Dennis are barely even on this album. Dennis later went on to say that he had nothing to do with it. He doesn't believe in this album. Carl only sings the lead on one song. It's called Sweet Sunday Kinda Love. It's just a safe, predictable album, and it doesn't really go anywhere. It doesn't really strike any new ground. It opens with a song called She's Got Rhythm, which Brian has this kind of strained falsetto going on. And some of the message boards I've read, people have called it Mickey Mouse with a cold, trying to sing She's Got Rhythm. It's a good song. It's a good fun rocker. It gets into the album. At first you're like, oh, okay, I can do this. Brian sounds like he's got his falsetto back. That's great. Come Go With Me, that's a really solid song. Really good cover. Al sings that one. And a few years later it came out as a single during the 10 Years of Harmony double album, Greatest Hits of 70s Hits. And it did pretty well. Hey Little Tomboy, which is what's on in the background right now, it's just kind of a creepy song. I've always got a creepy vibe of this one. It's about just watching this girl grow up and wanting her to be not a tomboy. But then you have some songs on here that were revised versions of the Christmas tunes they had come up with, and their album was rejected by their label. They were going to put out another Christmas album, and a lot of those songs have been released on like Beach Boys Ultimate Christmas, some CDs that have come out lately. Anyways, the label didn't want it, and they said go back to the drawing board. So they basically took the exact same songs they had and took out like the word Santa or Christmas, and that was it. They just kind of kept like Bells of Paris and Kona Coast were hashed from those sessions. Kona Coast is basically like Hawaii Part 2. I mean, they call out Hawaii, Hawaii, let's go to Hawaii. It's just like their old song. It's just a hard album to get into. Even if you're a hardcore fan, some people think this is the biggest piece of crap they ever put out. I don't think it's that bad. It's solidly produced. It sounds cohesive. It's not like a big garbage bag of ideas. Mike Love later went on to say something in the early 90s about how it was too democratic and there's too many ideas flowing around. Some of the lyrics are really cheesy. Some of the songs are really cheesy. Especially Pitter Patter, which is about rain. I mean, come on, guys. Come on. Winds of Change. Sorry, Al. It's not happening for me. But you do have some really, really standout tracks. I wouldn't say like killer moments or like the best songs they ever wrote, but interesting points anyway. Songs like My Diane that Brian wrote and Dennis sings. The only reason why it sticks out is because it actually has feeling and depth. Everything else is so sugary and flat. It just sounds like, hey, we got in the studio, we recorded a bunch of beach songs. Hey, we're the Beach Boys. The rest of the songs are just like covers. I mean, they do like Peggy Sue, Come Go With Me. Then they have songs like Won't You Come Out Tonight, which just the title alone lets you know, like, all right, well, it's about trying to get a date. I mean, it's exactly what it sounds like. They recorded it in Iowa, which is far away from California, at the Maharishi Institute in Fairfield, Iowa. I'm looking at the back cover. Here you go. Here's the back cover. Here's what three of the Beach Boys look without shirts on. Dennis looks so uninterested, and Carl's trying to have a good time. Carl only sings one song. He sings Sweet Sunday Kind of Love, and that's a redeeming song. Same as My Diane. The only reason why it's redeeming is because they're singing it. Like, they sing so well. They have emotion in their voice and power. Like, they're powerful and they have strength and character. Mike just comes across as really flat, and Al just comes across as like he's just singing some songs. Brian saves it a little bit, especially with Match Point of Our Love, which a lot of people for that is like a no-go song as well, but I like Match Point. I think it's a cool song. Nice little shuffle vibe going on. And Brian's voice sounds really solid. It sounds a lot more... It sounds like he practiced a lot to really get his voice back in shape. Here's Peggy Sue right now. This version's pretty good. I do like this one. I know a lot of people lambast this album and put it down and say it's the worst thing that they could have ever done. It's definitely not their best. That's for sure. I'm going to try to keep this video under 9 minutes here. If I had to give it a grade, I'd probably give it like, if I give it a letter grade, I'd give it a C-. It's an average album. It's okay. It's not going to harm anybody. It's not going to make you jump off your seat and go crazy. It's something you kind of put on in the background and go, oh, that's nice. That's a nice album. It's definitely not going to alter your life in any way, other than the fact that you heard it. I mean, you can't even buy the CD of this anymore. I mean, it's out of print. And finding the record is hard enough, too. So, this has been the Beach Boys MIU album, 1978. I recommend it if you're curious to see what the Beach Boys were up to in 1978. Other than that, it's just not worth it. They have better albums. Much, much better albums. Anything from the early 70s or 60s. Basically, just not this album. If you're a completist, go for it. Listen to it. Let me know what you think. Have you heard this album? Do you want to hear this album? Do you think Brian sounds like Mickey Mouse on She's Got Rhythm? Yeah, that's it. Beach Boys, MIU album, 1978. Thanks a lot. Oh, by the way, I love the Beach Boys. I should just put that out there. I love the Beach Boys. I just wanted to make an album review about this one. I'm going to do it for a bunch of other ones too. But I wanted to start with this one because I feel like no one's done this on YouTube, so I want to make a MIU album review. There you go.